Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, designers, and dreamers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today we're welcoming Nat Farber, whose journey from NASA's Europa Clipper mission to mountain cabin builder offers a refreshing perspective on the art of slow building. From finding burned land after the 4 Mile Canyon fire to spending 10 years crafting his vision, Nat shares how approaching construction as a creative project, rather than a race to completion, allowed him to build something truly unique. We'll explore how his engineering background influenced his design process, why he chose to test materials on a practice shed first, and how he eventually transitioned from aerospace to full-time building projects. Whether you're dreaming of designing your own space, curious about the intersection of engineering and architecture, or interested in how patience and persistence can lead to extraordinary results, this conversation offers both technical insights and creative inspiration. We'll dive into everything from fire-resistant building materials to the value of experiencing land through all the seasons, and why sometimes the best designs come from letting inspiration find you. Let's do it. Well, thanks for joining me. Thank you for your flexibility in rearranging this.
Yeah, no problem. It actually ended up working better for me. So,
Okay, good. I always hesitate to ask because I never know if that's the case, but every now and then it does work out better for both folks. I want to dive in, but I kind of want to start. I am very interested in your background, which is different from a lot of the folks that I talk to. So I'm hoping you can start by sharing with me like a little bit more about your background, specifically what you were. I mean, everything obviously because it relates to what you're doing. But you said that you worked on the NASA, I'm going to say this wrong, Europa Clipper mission. Can you
yeah,
tell
I
us a little
did.
bit about that to start with?
Yeah, I worked on that for many years at CU, um,
While
where
you were a student there?
no, I worked as what's called a professional research assistant, which is
Okay.
it's basically like working as an engineer in industry, but I was working
Okay.
for the university, and yeah, I got to work with lots of really smart scientists, and um, um, yeah, worked on building this instrument and designing the mechanical aspects of it, and figuring out how to actually build the thing. So
So for people who have not heard of this instrument, what exactly was it designed to do?
yeah, so the well, it's going on this spacecraft called the Europa Clipper, um, and it's going to Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter, and it is one of many instruments on that spacecraft, and this one. Um, so that let me give you some background about that moon, Europa. Um, it's one of the places where scientists think probably the highest chance that there could be life in our solar system. Well, if there is life in our solar system, that
Okay.
it might be there, um, because it has a liquid water ocean under,
Similar to us.
yeah, under an ice crust, and um, because of the really elliptical orbit that the moon has around Jupiter, um, it actually kind of gets squeezed, and water from the ocean comes up through cracks in the ice to the surface and refreezes. So the surface ice is from recent ocean water. So if there is any signs of life in the ocean, it would be also on the surface. And then there are all these meteorites that impact the moon and send these ice dust uh, plumes off into space. And then our instrument on the spacecraft flies through these plumes and analyzes the ice dust particles for traces of amino acids, um, or other things that could point to life.
And did they find life?
Well, it hasn't gotten there yet.
Okay. That
Uh,
was going to be my next question. How long did it take to get there?
I think it's going to take a few more years to get there.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah.
And then we'll know. That sounds like a dangerous flight, flying through space, just, like, surrounded by ice that, like, has broken off and is flying at you?
I think it's like a very thin mist, kind of, not
Okay,
like chunks.
okay, that feels better. But all of this is important because you studied when you went to Colorado University, I'm guessing.
Yeah, to see you. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so you were studying engineering there?
Yeah, I studied, yeah, at first I studied aerospace engineering and then I switched to mechanical engineering. Um, and yeah, I interned at this laboratory um, when I was a student and then later came back as a professional.
Okay. So this is important because I feel like a lot of the people that we talk to on this podcast are not engineers and often have either renovated their cabin, taught themselves how to do it, built a cabin, hired someone to build it. It's not that common that we get to talk to someone. We've talked to a couple, but who have actually come up with the idea, designed it, and then built it themselves. I think there's a lot of value in that because part of the struggles we find in the build are like outsourcing and building a team and all of that. But when you do it yourself, you remove all of that, but add a whole bunch of different challenges that we don't talk about as much. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of excited to hear about your process, but I do think understanding your background to know how you had kind of the confidence to go about that. Is that what you think gave you the confidence to be like, I can do this myself? That you had that degree?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, yeah, having that degree, because I mean, my whole job is in engineering is just to figure out how to build things.
Right.
Um, So yeah, that definitely gave me a lot of confidence. Also, I was really interested in, and well, always have been really interested in architecture. And when I was in high school, my high school actually offered some architecture classes that I took, and I was considering either doing architecture or engineering,
Okay.
and ended up uh, going with engineering. But I
Okay.
still wanted to do architecture, so
So you're
that's
like, why not do it in my free time?
yeah, exactly.
This makes so much sense because even if your career so I come from a family of mechanical engineers,
Oh, no way.
and they all do different work when it comes like, right, you study mechanical engineering, but, like, one of them built naval ships, and, like, there's different things you can do with it. But it really does hone that or strengthen that muscle of just, like, figure it outness. Like, I have enough skills, and I've done it enough times to just figure it out, and my uncle, who's a mechanical engineer, ended up building his own cabin. I feel like
Oh,
that
cool.
becomes this kind of, like, play area for your skills because it's lower stakes, it's just for you. It can be creative and have the engineering side to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I love about it, especially the creative part, where in my engineering job, there's so many requirements on what um, what I have to build,
Right.
and so many constraints, and it can get a little bit frustrating sometimes. So
Yeah.
it was a really nice to be able to do a project where I could just do whatever I wanted.
That totally makes sense. I feel like I used to work in a co-working space with a bunch of creatives, and we started this tradition. I didn't start it, but I participated. Can you hear that? Sean decided now is the time to screw. We're working on a big house project, and he's screwing everything in now. So, folks, if you hear that, that's what's happening. I'm sorry. And we did this we called it the very shitty art show or something. And the idea was we're all full-time creatives in our day job. So you have to pick an art that is not what you do and like do a bad job of it. That there's still this beauty in creating, even if it's not to sell or to do professionally or to be really good at it, there's still this like value in just creating. Now, your cabin is not even close to shitty, so it's a little bit different. But I do think when you do this kind of stuff for a living, to be able to step outside of it and find creative play space as adults is really hard to do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's hard to find the time, but
Yeah.
luckily I was in my 20s and single and had plenty of free time when I started the
And
project.
lots of energy. I
Yeah.
miss that. Okay, we're gonna dive into the details of the project, but I want you to just start high level and give like the elevator pitch for your cabin. If you had like 30 to 60 seconds to tell someone about your cabin, what would you tell them?
Oh man, about like what it is now or about the journey of building it?
All of it in under 60 seconds. There will be follow-up questions, I promise.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I guess I'll start with the journey of it. I found this land that was burnt after the 4 Mile Canyon fire and immediately fell in love with it and put an offer on it the same day. And then spent a couple of years trying to figure out what I would do with it. And I wanted to build something. I didn't know what, and settled on building this kind of a house slash cabin. Um, that the property has really nice, really amazing views of this mountain peak, Sugarloaf Mountain, and it's also really hard to get to, and really, even though it's not that far from Boulder, about 25-minute drive, it feels really remote, and it's up this mile long, narrow, steep dirt road all the way at the end, and there are no other houses around, and it just had this amazing view. So I
Okay, I hear you on the view.
yeah.
When you decided to build this, did you know that you were gonna be hosting people in it, or were you building it just for you to begin with?
No, I was just building it for me, and I didn't
Okay.
really know like if I was going to live there full time or if it was going to be a second house for myself or um, what. I was just building it just to build it.
I always wonder this when people say they found the perfect spot of land, and there is this tension between the best views often require remoteness, right? Like if you're in a neighborhood that's easy to get to, it's just not the same. But then that introduces so many challenges when it comes to building. And so I always wonder how people know when you travel all the way up there and you're like, yes, the view is beautiful, but did you think about any of the challenges that it would present?
Well, I kind of thought the rough, steep dirt road was kind of fun because um, I used to like off-roading a lot. I kind of stopped off-roading anymore after having that property, just after it became like a usual normal thing. But yeah, I kind of thought it was fun being so remote and up that dirt road. Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it gets you to places that you can't go otherwise, and in terms of unique experiences, I feel like that's crucial, but we'll get into hosting later, but I feel like once you're hosting guests there, it becomes like a whole 'nother thing.
yeah, for sure, especially in the wintertime.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
god, my least favorite season for hosting. Okay, so you find this perfect piece of land, you know right away that you're gonna be the one designing it and doing all the architecture work. You just dove right in at the point that you bought the land?
Well, no, so I didn't really know I was going to do all the architecture work.
Okay,
Um, so I bought the land, and really for the first year, I just kind of thought in my head about ideas, but I didn't really like settle on anything or really put much effort into trying to settle on anything. I just bought the land, cleaned it up because it was burnt and there was a house on it before. And
okay.
I had to clean it all up. Um,
Yeah.
so I did the cleanup. And then I'm from California where trees grow kind of fast. And I kind of thought that I could make it into a forest again by planting a lot of little trees. So
Yeah,
got all these trees, like hundreds of little trees, um, and planted them everywhere and watered them. And
by hand.
well, a lot of them by hand, and then it became too much work, so I made this giant drip irrigation
Okay,
system.
okay,
Um,
smart.
but yeah, I thought maybe in like 10 years it could be a forest again. um,
And it's been 10 years, is it a forest?
Yeah, it's been more than 10 years now. It's a forest of little trees that are, I think the biggest ones that I planted are maybe 6 feet tall now.
Okay, that's not bad
So,
though. That's
yeah,
something.
yeah, it's progress,
Yeah, they're getting there.
but it's definitely slow. So anyway, yeah, I spent a lot of time up there camping and like had friends over and did campfires and yeah, just hung out up there a lot.
Enjoying it, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I think that helped inspire what to build. Um,
I have heard that some of the best advice that we often don't take, which is like just experience the land in all 4 seasons before you make any plans because you're going to learn about like what it's like to be there and what you want to accentuate and what direction you want to face it. All of those things. And yet so many of us are all about instant gratification. We buy I mean, I'm not judging. I cleared the land a month after I closed, right? Like but we buy the land, clear it, immediately start building, get it done as fast as we can. And that isn't the approach that you took, which I really admire.
yeah, I mean, I also couldn't really afford to start building right away because I just bought the land and that
Yeah.
took all of my money.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, where was I?
So you experienced it for a year, hung out there.
Yeah, experienced there for a year, hung out there, and I was living in a condo in town in Boulder, and I also really wanted space to work on like my woodworking projects and just other
Yeah.
hobbies, and build things. So I decided to build this house and with a garage underneath, so I could have kind of a workshop space, um, and yeah, so designed it with that big. Oh yeah, so I wasn't sure I was going to design it myself. I actually talked to um, a friend who was an architect, um, but and he came up with some ideas which I looked at, and
And
that
what
actually
happened?
helped like figure out what I wanted to build.
Okay.
But like he came up with these crazy ideas, like with these super angular, like giant glass, um, like like crazy stuff. And I was like, oh my god, like there's no way I can figure out. Like I'm not gonna be able to build that. It's
Because
especially
you knew at that point you wanted to build it yourself.
yeah, I knew I wanted to build it myself.
Okay.
And um, yeah, so I came up with that design as kind of something I felt I could reasonably achieve building it. Um,
Did
and
you pull inspiration from anywhere? Like these days it's so big to like scroll on Instagram and save things or make a Pinterest page, or was it just out of your own head because you had some experience doing this?
you know, I looked at lots of pictures of cabins and lots of things online, um, but I don't feel like I took anything from like it helped me get ideas, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did kind of come up with the whole
Yeah.
design,
Okay.
and I really just built it around the site and the
Yeah.
direction of the views and the sun, where the sun rises. Uh,
Yep.
I wanted there's smaller windows on one side, like especially by the bed, that capture the sun rising. Um,
Oh, nice.
and then the sun moves over to the big wall of windows, and there's that big overhang there, which is
Hmm.
designed to shade it in the summer so that it doesn't get too hot,
Yep.
um, and too bright in the summer, but lets in lots of light in the
Yeah.
winter. Um,
Yeah. Where did yeah. Did you develop kind of a like your own style? Like have you built anything since? Is this like representative of your personal style or is this like one and done?
um, I think a lot of aspects of it are my personal style. I don't know if I would do the exterior the same if I built
Okay.
another one.
Okay.
Um, but I learned about like the materials that I chose. I really like and would use again,
Okay.
um,
Which
especially.
ones? Because there's a quote in the Colorado Homes magazine article that said, you used exterior materials, including corrugated metal and dense kumaru wood
Yeah.
to meet ignition resistance requirements. I do not know what that means, but it sounds very intentional in the materials you were using for some of the requirements in Colorado or for that location.
Yeah, so anywhere in the mountains in Boulder County, uh, the building codes require ignition resistant materials, which really,
Is that fire resistance?
yeah, fire resistant.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so that kind of limits the materials to on the exterior to stucco, metal, you know, stone and concrete.
Okay.
Um, very big wood timbers are allowed, and then some wood, like these extremely dense hardwoods, which um, I wanted some wood on the outside for the warmth and to contrast with the metal,
Yeah.
um, but I didn't want to use too much of that because I'm not really sure how sustainable it is.
Mm.
that type of wood being coming from rainforests, even if it
Yeah.
is like FSC certified or sustainably harvested. I think it's
Yep.
still not great to use a lot of it. So
Yeah.
I used mostly metal and some of that wood and some big wood timbers as well. And also the wood from the site. Well, I didn't really use any wood that was burnt from the site or the trees, but it's what grows there naturally is it's mostly Douglas fir. So
Okay.
I felt it was fitting to use that same wood species as much as possible.
Is that on the interior that you've integrated fur?
So it's on all those big beams that are on the interior and exterior,
Okay.
and for the kitchen and all the window trim. Um,
Okay. It's interesting because I think something like government regulations can be like the requirements for the exterior by some folks can be seen as like, why can't I build what I want? I bought this land. But then obviously there's the side of like, well, there's a reason for this because there's a lot of forest fires. So this makes complete sense. But there's also the side of sometimes creativity can be really hard when operating without any constraints because it's like, where do I go? So government regulations or other things that, if you're looking to build more sustainably, which I suspect in Boulder is like a very common thing, um, those constraints actually help to give you direction. Did you find them motivating you and helping you know where to go next as this being like your first design, or did you feel the burden of some of them having to operate within them?
no, I feel like what you said is really true. That having it my selection narrowed down already
Yeah.
helped, and also it would be something that I would want to do regardless, and it makes a lot of sense to build
Yeah.
ignition resistant in that type of area. Um,
Which is so interesting though, because it's not that common in other places. Like in cabin culture in general, you see a lot of wooded cabins. I mean, obviously, we think of cabins, we think of wood. But with watching recent forest fires, in some places where you would expect it, and some places where you wouldn't, beginning to wonder if it's not a good practice for everyone.
yeah, probably should unless you live. I mean, the eastern forests, I think there aren't wildfires very
Not
much,
yet,
right?
Nat.
Uh,
But who knows when they're coming for us, right? LA didn't used to have forest fires. Anyway, it's something I think about a lot, but that could just be my anxiety speaking. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely at least in the western part of the country, I think it should
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
required
Anyway,
everywhere.
you were saying that it was helpful to work within those restraints. Were there any other restraints of the land that kind of forced you in a certain direction or presented challenges that like at first were unwelcome, but later became actually like an instigation for something creative?
Yeah, so there were setback requirements and that kind of um so there were a couple things. One, I was rebuilding a house after the fire. I mean, completely different than what was there before. But
Yeah.
that allowed me to streamline the permitting process with the county, as long as I rebuilt um, within
Oh,
mostly the same footprint of what was there before.
okay.
So that kind of set the location. And then there are some setback requirements that I had to meet also, um, which kind of pushed it back um, into that hillside. Um, so yeah, that definitely drove the decision to kind of build it. It's kind of half underground. The first
Yeah.
story is, except for one wall, is buried underground. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that was the same footprint as the one that came before it,
mostly. Yeah,
mostly. Okay.
yeah, mostly
Okay.
within it. The house that was there
Okay.
before was actually a lot bigger.
And they didn't care that it was bigger as long as it wasn't yours wasn't larger than the one that was there.
Yeah, they didn't care that mine was, well, the one that was there before was a lot smaller. I mean, sorry, a lot bigger than
Okay.
mine. So
So
yeah,
you just had to build within that footprint.
I think there's like a certain percentage of it had to be within the footprint. I don't remember what it
Okay.
was before. Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the timeline for your build because I do think it's one of the things that is most unique compared to a lot of the builds that we've talked about before. And so how long did it take you total start to finish? And about how was that timeline determined?
Um, I just built as fast as I could, and it ended up taking that long, which was 10 years. But I
Yeah.
finished. So when I started the project, I don't think I would have done it if I knew it was going to take as long as it
Yeah.
did. I remember when I went to go get my permit, um, the permit guy at the county um, asked me how long did I think it was going to how long did I think it would take me? And I was like, I think it'll probably take me 2 years to build it. And he was like, I built my own house also, and it took me 10 years. And then we were chatting. He like became a contractor after that and built a bunch of other projects before working for the county. Um, but then what he said, like exactly foreshadowed what happened. It took exactly 10 years.
Yeah. I feel like you're laughing at it a little bit, like, I can't believe it took me so long, and I actually, as I was reading about it, I found not necessarily, I don't know if envy is the right word, but I do think there's something that ends up being really intentional about a process where you're doing it all yourself, even if it takes 10 years. You're not rushing it along for the sake of like throwing it up on Airbnb or getting it rented. You're like doing it the way you want on the timeline that you want or the timeline that you can that fits with your life. I don't think enough people think of that as an option. And so they either wait until they can afford to do it real quick or they don't do it. And I feel like this option is almost like a more authentic, like it's back to when people first started building cabins, what they were actually doing, building it themselves on the weekends when they could. And that was an enjoyable process for them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was enjoyable for me mostly. And it kind of just felt like a big art project.
Yeah.
And I think that's what helped achieve the result was that I wasn't really under any time pressure or financial pressure to finish it, or any goal of getting it on Airbnb because I wasn't even planning on doing
Right.
Airbnb.
It
Um,
like barely even existed when you started, I feel like.
yeah, I didn't even know what it was until a few years after I started.
Right. So you were
um,
truly doing it for yourself.
yeah, I was really doing it for myself, just as a project, as
Yeah.
basically like a big art project.
Yeah. I love that whenever people ask me like for build advice or like when they're first thinking about it, the number one thing I always say is like, I don't know, what do you want? Like build what you want. If there's something that doesn't exist or does, but not in this place, and that's what you would want to experience, I bet there's other people who want it too. And even if they don't, you're going to be way better at marketing and or selling it if it's something that you authentically love instead of you're building it because you think that's what the market wants. And I just feel like a long build like this is the epitome of doing that. Were there any the only challenge I can see, I mean, besides obviously, like if you have impatience, that would be frustrating, but that things can change along the way. Like you can have a plan in mind and then maybe you end up pivoting because the materials aren't around or there's new materials or like how many changes did you end up making along the way simply because the world had just changed as you were building?
Oh yeah, I made so many changes. And also, as I got into the project, I learned more about design and figured out more about what I wanted. And when I first did the plans, I actually had the exterior being stucco and stone, and the roof didn't have all those wood beams.
Yeah.
It was just kind of enclosed, and it was going to have drywall. Um, with the ceiling. So um, yeah, as I went, I actually built this little shed on the property, this 120 square foot little shed, and I did it with stone and stucco like I was going to do on the house to learn. Um, and after
You
doing
did
that, I
that
was
first as like a practice.
yeah, I was like practice. And I was like, man, I really don't want to do stucco and stone anymore on the house. I didn't really love the look of it, and it was a lot of work, and I didn't feel like it was like historically. I just didn't feel like it fit
Yeah.
properly with the site, and a lot of the old buildings um, in that area is a mining. It was a mining area
Yeah.
back in the um, like 1800s, and uh, there were a lot of like all the old buildings there were wood and corrugated metal. Those
Uh,
those were kind of the materials. So I realized that.
if you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. That's so interesting, though, that you say that this is more historically accurate, because when I look at it, it's very trendy right now, right? And it is, I think that that article used the words mountain modern.
Uh-huh.
And so it does have kind of a modern cabin feel to it, but you're actually saying that that is historically accurate to the area too.
Yeah, I mean it's a modern twist on it, the way I implemented it, I'd say,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I wanted to use those old materials and also just to, I don't know, to somehow uh, put some of that feeling of those old mining days and history of the place into the structure.
Yeah. How did your mindset change over those 10 years? Like, I'm sure I just know personally from like the beginning of a build, there's a lot of excitement, right? A lot of dreaming. There like possibilities are endless. And then that has peaks and valleys throughout the build, but I haven't experienced one as long as 10 years, and I'm wondering like how you stayed motivated throughout that time and how your mindset shifted from the beginning to when you finally finished.
Yeah, it was hard staying motivated. I think, yeah, there were periods of time where I actually didn't work on it and took breaks. Some winters I didn't work on it very much. Let's see, I did some other projects. Like while I was working on it, I took some time to remodel the condo that I was living um, in town, and didn't get very much done during that period. Also,
Yeah.
um, uh,
You lived life.
yeah, we had a baby.
Yeah.
He's 5 now, and that slowed things down for a
Yeah.
while. Um, so yeah, I took a lot of breaks, but I think what kept me motivated was um, just the fact that for me it kind of was like a creative art project, and that I wanted to see it through and wanted to see what I could create, and was excited about that. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's what I think what kept me going.
I heard something recently that said, for someone like me who can tend to be a little bit of a workaholic, it said, we tend to ask ourselves, have we worked hard enough to deserve some rest? But maybe instead we should be asking, have we rested enough to do our best work? I kind of like hear that a little bit here where you're like, well, I took a lot of breaks. And it's like, maybe that's exactly how we should do this. So many of us end up like so burnt out at the end of a build that I'm like, did I even do my best work when we finally got to the inside and we were furnishing it and decorating it? Or was I just like rushing to the finish because I was ready to be done, you know? Versus if you allow yourself a longer timeline and take rests along the way, maybe we're able to do better work when we do it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and also just if you get burnt out on one thing, there are plenty of other things to do. So you
That's
just
true. That's true.
do
That's
something
true.
else for a while.
Yeah.
But I think I did actually get pretty burnt out on construction when I was done with it. And I didn't do any really construction projects until, yeah, it kind of took like 2 years to not do anything after I finished.
Yep. I'm going on almost 4 years now since our build, and I keep thinking the desire will come back up, and it's just not. I just don't think I need to do another one.
Oh man.
I didn't even build it myself. I just like managed the build and I'm like, I'm good for a while, I think. It is a lot. I can't imagine if I were doing the building. Okay, but then you hit the point where you finish. When that happened, did you immediately start inviting guests into it? Was that something that you talked about? I'm guessing at that point you were married, so your wife was also involved in this. Um, did you at what point did you start thinking like maybe it isn't just for us? Maybe we'll share it with other folks. And why and like how did you reach that conclusion?
Yeah, so it was kind of complicated. I guess there's a lot happened in my life, which I actually got divorced. We're still friends, but we're no longer together. And
Okay.
she really didn't want to live up there.
Oh,
Like at first, we actually moved up there before it was finished together, and she really hated it up there.
where did
And
you stay? In the cabin?
yeah, in the cabin. I mean, it was
Okay.
finished enough. It just didn't have
Yeah.
like trim and other details.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, she especially because we had a baby, that made it really hard.
Yeah.
And being so remote, it just didn't work out very well
Yeah.
and caused a lot of stress. It was also COVID times, um, like being isolated and then being even more
Mhm.
isolated up there. It just was a bad combination.
Yeah.
Um, so um, yeah, so then uh, let's see. So yeah, she moved to a house that she bought in town, and I moved to a house that I had that I also had been fixing up in town,
Okay.
um, and finished it and decided, well, I'm not going to be living up there. It's not really that practical um,
Okay.
to live there full time with a kid, um, and it just made sense to share it with other people and
Yeah.
um, do Airbnb.
So what was that experience like for you? I think and I'm totally generalizing, but I do know a lot of mechanical engineers. And I don't necessarily think of them as like hospitality would not be my initial instinct when I think of them. But sharing it with other people isn't just about like throwing it up on Airbnb. And you even said in the pre-interview form, like it is for you about the experience that you're creating for them. Have you always had that, or did that take some work for you to get from the place of building this cabin and then opening it up? Because it's just shifting gears from building. It is very logical brain, and hosting tends it needs to be a little bit more heart centered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. It definitely, um, yeah, it was definitely a shift. I feel like it was a shift that was good for me. That I feel like it does fit with my personality and of taking care of people. And I really like traveling, um, and I think I kind of um, like sharing or creating an experience for other people that I would want to have when I'm traveling. Um,
Do you travel
but
on Airbnb? So have you had the flip, like the reverse experience of it to know what you wanted to create?
yeah, I do use Airbnb a lot when I travel.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I feel like that's good preparation for being a host though, because you know what you would want.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that Airbnb, and I think like what else? Yeah, just inspiration from traveling in other places like New Zealand and staying in mountain
Mm,
cabins a lot and backpacking and hiking and um, yeah, I kind of just wanted to create a unique experience for people. I think they're, um, and also kind of just share what I built with other people
right.
gives me a lot of joy. Seeing other people appreciate it when I'm not using it for myself.
Yeah. That is a different element than a lot of us, I think, who either like bought, renovated, or even had a builder build our places. When you've designed it and put all of your own work into it, I almost feel like it has this like profound added joy in sharing it with other people because it has that pride in it. It isn't just like, oh, I can create this experience, I can make some money. It's like, no, I literally built this with my two hands and now I'm able to share it with you. And
Yeah,
I
yeah. I feel like I'm sharing a piece of myself.
Right. And I read your reviews. This is it just I find reviews always give me insight about a place that I might not get otherwise. And your name came up so often, which tells me that you are very personally invested in it, right? You know that guests only write reviews with names when it's like about more than just, oh, the location is good, the amenities were nice. But it's like, no, the host was really like helped to make this experience better. And I can see how because you built it, that is a much more personal experience. Okay, it's funny that you mentioned New Zealand because when looking I obviously haven't been to your place, but when looking at your place, it reminded me a lot of a place that I stayed in New Zealand outside of Queenstown that required like you literally had to park and then like hike up to it with all of your stuff and it was like truly off grid. Where did you go in New Zealand?
Well, I did a study abroad there when I was in college. I
Okay.
didn't really have money to stay in nice places or expensive places. I did, and I was really into backpacking and hiking. So
So you don't need a
um,
nice place.
yeah, so and New Zealand has this hut system with these I don't know hundreds or thousand or something backcountry huts. Um, that you can just hike to, and uh, they're really inexpensive to stay in. A lot of them have
Yep.
amazing views, and they have wood or coal to build a fire,
Yep.
and other people that are backpacking also show up, and you make friends and meet
Yeah.
other people. It's a really great experience.
That's the way to do it. I don't know if you know this, but Maine actually has a hut system. Not nearly as extensive, it sounds, as the one in New Zealand. But if you've never been to Maine, if you go up to northern Maine, you can either like snowshoe or cross country ski or hike from hut to hut doing the same thing.
Oh, that's really cool.
They do call it the way life should be, in case you didn't know that about Maine. So, right
Nice.
here in the States, we have our own hut system.
That's good to know. I'll have to do that. I'll have to go
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Okay, now I wanna ask a little bit about the marketing side, because again, this feels like kind of right brain, left brain, like a different part to move into the world of, like, being able to photograph it well, tap into social media, market it to make sure that you're staying occupied, and it like, what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, so well, at first I just did Airbnb at first,
Okay.
um, and didn't do any social media or anything. And it did great on Airbnb. Um, and honestly, I'm not really sure yet if doing all this social media stuff that I've been doing recently is even um, worth it.
We all ask ourselves that question every day, Nat.
um,
Is this even worth it?
I know. I saw one of your other videos about that. I was like, oh man, maybe I should have looked at this before. um, anyway, hopefully eventually it'll become worth it. I'll see. Um, but yeah, I just started on it, did it on Airbnb, and took the best photos I could.
So you did
And
all those photos?
most of them, yeah. Well, initially when I first put it on
Okay.
Airbnb,
Yeah.
most of the photos I just took with my phone. Um, I mean, I tried to make them as I feel like I'm decent-ish
Yeah.
at taking photos, and I've gotten better. Um, but let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I decided that maybe I should make my own website and do some social media. Um, so I started doing
When
that,
did
and
that start for you?
it started. Well, the website was just finished a few weeks ago, so I really
Okay.
only started this a couple months ago
Okay.
with Instagram and the website.
Wow, and you already have a couple thousand followers.
Yeah, so I hired somebody. So there's this photographer. Her name is Maddie, and maybe like a year ago, I gave her a free stay in exchange for some photography
Is
of
this
the
Maddie Brandon?
Maddie Maddie B. Maddie B creates is her Instagram.
Okay. I think this
But
is the same one who photographed ours.
really, it's not
Maybe.
Maddie Balamont is actually her last name.
Oh, okay. Okay, yes, but I found her. Okay, so you hired her or
Yeah,
you started by doing a trade for photos, for
so
content.
so we did a trade for photos, and then she posted her photos on her website, and that's what got the attention of that magazine, the Colorado
Okay.
Homes and Lifestyles.
Okay.
And let's see, and then yeah, I just really liked her photography and working with her, and she convinced me to do Instagram.
There you
And
go.
so I hired her to do it. And we kind of work on it together, like collaboration. Um,
Yeah.
so some of the photos are hers, some of the photos are ones that I take. And I think actually through being friends with her, it kind of inspired me to get into photography. So I got a nice camera and I've been learning, um, learning Lightroom and all that kind of stuff.
Which is
Um,
so helpful if you're gonna be doing social media because so much of it is really helpful to have photographers come stay. And honestly, I do professional video and I still have photographers come and do content because it's just if they're good at it, they're good at it. It makes a difference. Um, but if it's your place and you live near and you can go there to develop those skills and at least produce some of your own content, because man, Instagram is like a machine. You have to constantly be putting out content. It's like
yeah,
nearly impossible to hire someone to do all of that.
yeah, it'd be too expensive. So I'm just
Right.
kind of doing it as like a fun hobby mostly,
Yeah.
and I hope it will lead to more bookings. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'll see.
But I also think when it's your own cabin, sometimes the angles or things I capture are different, and sometimes photographers capture angles I'd never thought of, which I also love, but you have such a different relationship with the space than someone now maybe if Maddie comes regularly, it's a bit different, but you literally designed it and built it. So the appreciation this is where I think social media can be so valuable. The appreciation that you have for every single detail in that cabin, nobody can come in there and capture it the way that you will, or even talk about it the way that you would, right? Because even if a photographer gives you a picture and you post it on social media, you can talk about what is in that picture and like what it took to create that, you know? There's just that I think is where we sometimes miss opportunities on social media to share that part of our brains because nobody else can do that for you, right? But like if I'm going to stay someplace, it kind of adds extra value to understand and know all of those details.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the photos that I've been taking and time lapses and things have been about the view. And
Mm,
I also do spend a lot of time up there when I don't have guests and stay there myself. So there's just like certain times when there's like a really great sunset or sunrise
yeah,
um, that you would never get if you just had a photographer go up there,
right,
like unless they got extremely lucky. So
right.
just me being there all the time
Yeah.
really helps.
I like hearing that you still use it. I feel like so often once we start renting it to other folks, even if we try to avoid it, and this is admittedly a challenge of mine, even if we try and avoid it, there's like a number attached to your time spent there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I usually don't block out that much time for myself, mostly just when there aren't bookings.
Yeah.
And
And that's nice being close because we're so far away, we have to block it. And so then it's like impossible to not think about the opportunity cost every time. And I try really
yeah,
hard not to do that. So we still go. But it must be nice being closer and you can be like, "Oh, you know what? No one's there. I might go for a couple nights and, like, work remotely from there," or something like that.
yeah. How far is your house from your cabin?
A 13-hour drive.
Oh my God, really? Wow, that must be really challenging to manage because
Yeah, we live in
that's
North
completely
Carolina, and the
different.
cabin is
Okay.
in Maine.
Wow.
But it means we get to go to Maine all the time because my family is there, and so it is nice to be able to travel to some place to visit people and not be an inconvenience to them, like, not have to, like, crash in their guest room or rely on them for meals, but to be able to, like, be up there. So, there's advantages to being that far away, for sure. The disadvantage is that there is this, like, hidden opportunity cost with every time that we spend there, so
Yeah, for sure. It's probably also forced you to have other people do all the cleaning and all those
yes,
maintenance types of things. So
yes.
probably makes your
Yes,
life
which is
easier.
a definite advantage for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanna leave folks with maybe 3 pieces of advice that you would have for someone who is in the very early stages, and I would think maybe 1 advice for the design, 1 advice for the build, and then maybe 1 piece of advice for the marketing that you've found works for you.
Okay. So I guess it just I don't know. It's hard to give advice without knowing who I'm giving advice to.
Or, okay, how about this? The number 1 thing you learned about designing, the number 1 thing you learned about building, and the number 1 thing that you've learned about marketing. So your greatest takeaways from this project, this art project.
Yeah. Okay. So building and wait, and what was this? The middle one?
Designing first. Step
Okay.
one, then
Yeah.
building, and then marketing
Yeah.
or hosting.
Designing,
You can do
building,
either
and
one.
marketing. Okay. And hosting. Okay. So I think for um, designing and building, I think the important things are to really experience the location for a long time and
Yeah,
not to rush into a design, um, to give yourself a lot of time to for the ideas to kind of come to you.
yeah,
Um, I feel like uh, you can't really like search like online for design, um, to design your place. You have to be there and just let the
yeah,
inspiration come to you at the
yeah.
pace that it will.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that's my design thing, and then um, building. I don't know. It's considering I built it myself and learned a lot. Yeah, I guess my advice would be different for somebody that would want to build it themselves or hire people. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I'd have good advice for people that want to hire people, but people that want to build it themselves, um, just get into it and be prepared for it to take a long time and to have to redo things and do things more than once. And let's see what else, and also like practice on smaller scale projects if you can.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like that is when you talked about that shed, what a good idea to test it out on a small scale. In knitting, it's called, what is it? You have to do a swatch, I think is what it's called, to like measure your oh my god, I'm not a very good knitter, clearly, to measure whatever your knots are so that you
okay.
know like what size you should make it. But it's like a very small scale to then translate to the big one. And I just love what you said about doing that with the shed, especially because in your case, you were like, "Oh, thank God I did this because I'm not doing
Yeah,
that on the full cabin," you know? But I've never heard someone say that they've done that before.
yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
definitely
that's really
helps.
good advice.
Um, yeah, or start on like remodeling projects or just other whatever you can do.
Yeah.
Um, and then let's see, in terms of marketing, I think just starting out with Airbnb, just having the best photos as possible,
Mhm.
um, and getting the first few reviews. I wasn't really sure how to price it at first. I didn't
Yeah.
really even know how much I could charge. I was at first kind of just hoping that it would just be a little bit of extra money. Um, I had no idea like how full I could have it booked or what I could charge.
Yeah.
I mean, it ended up making enough money that I could um, quit my engineering job and just work on building projects. Uh,
Amazing.
yeah, um, but I didn't know that when I started. But I think it helped to start with the price really low, especially before I had very many reviews, um,
Yeah.
to get the reviews. And so, yeah, I think just having really good reviews and really good photos, um, and just making sure the guests had a really good experience. I'm kind of
Yeah.
a perfectionist, so I really wanted everything to be perfect for the
Yep.
guests.
Yeah.
And
The best hosts are.
yeah.
This is Sean and my biggest fight. Just yesterday, we had it again. Is like, if you're going to help with this, it needs to be perfect. And he's like, "Well, I'm not capable of perfection." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you because it needs to be perfect."
That's funny.
You either have that desire, I feel like, or you don't. And it's good. I can just do the hosting and he can do other things, but I do think that firmly believe that makes the best host. Okay, Nat, you're doing this full time now of just working on building projects. So what's next? Do you have another project in mind?
Yeah, so well, I've been working on this project right now, my own project. I'm building a workshop for my woodworking. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's this 1,500 square foot space with huge windows and 27-foot high ceiling
Wow.
and like all this wood and beams and steel. Um, it's going to be kind of an inspiring place for myself.
Yeah.
But I have also been looking at other projects. It's a little bit harder now with the regulations, especially in Colorado. Um, but yeah, I've been trying to find a piece of land where I could do maybe a smaller kind of cabin, but in a really
Yeah.
beautiful location, um, and design and build it myself.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. It's tricky because I don't think I could do it in Boulder County. They only allow one vacation rental per person. Um,
Okay. I didn't know that.
yeah, which I think it makes sense if like to keep people from buying up
Yep.
properties. And I think the way that I would do something, I feel like it's to just buy a piece of land that probably nobody would do anything with anyway and build
Yeah.
something. I feel like I wish that would be allowed.
Right.
But
The downside of regulations is that they don't really account for like individual exceptions, but to your point, are definitely important.
yeah. So I've been looking at land in other places in Colorado. Um, Most places have caps though on vacation rentals, and if I started a project, by the time I finished it, I don't know if I'd be able to get a license. Um, Things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I'm kind of just looking around and dreaming, and I think eventually the right project will come to
Yeah.
me.
Well, I look forward to seeing what's next because I do think it's really interesting. I mean, to create something so beautiful in your first build, I can only imagine what will happen the second, or I guess third, if you're counting the workshop, third time around, where you're like continuing to learn and build off of everything that you've learned in the first two. So I'll be excited to see whatever it is that comes next.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be excited to show you. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I
Well,
feel like
thank you so much for joining me.
yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of your podcast and your content.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.